when I'm at networking events, and like, let's say I was at the BNI event like a couple weeks ago, everyone's talking to each other because most of them already knew each other. There weren't that many guests, right? Everyone's already with another person or they're in a small group, and I'm there, right? And my friend Todd, who invited me, he brought me around to meet specific people, which was fun. And when I feel that when I'm in the conversation, it's a great conversation because I also like meeting people, but I never want to seem like a burden. I never want to seem like I'm butting into a conversation. So when you are alone, either in the Zoom room or you're in person, maybe more Zoom, because I mean, only is for everybody, even though there's a chapter in New York and a chapter in the UK, but like either way, Zoom or in person, how do you personally join a conversation that's already happening or start talking with somebody even though no one is available to talk to? Do you see what I'm saying here? Like from a shy perspective,
Yeah.
like how do we begin the conversation?
Do you know what? And I still struggle with that, particularly in the room. And I think a lot of that comes down to the event itself. That is kind of the responsibility of the people hosting that event, to get you as the visitor involved. You know, we always say at ONLE that to our hosts, your job is to signpost this meeting and make the visitors welcome, because the members already know what's going on and they're already comfortable. So look after the visitors. So I would say, if the host isn't particularly looking out for you and try and get you into conversations, it is hard. I'm not going to pretend there's some magic formula. I think you've just got to approach people, smile. Just remember that anyone that's going to a networking event, in my mind, is giving you license to talk to them.
Okay.
Because if not, they shouldn't be there. And I would argue that they're at fault. And I've seen this in a room, Brandon. I've seen people that are in a conversation, a visitor comes up, and they kind of give them short shrift. That's bad on the part of the members or the people in that group. So, yeah, I think you just have to be brave and bold. And again, I'd go in rather than saying, "Hi, this is me. This is what I do." Just walk in and say, "Oh, hi guys, I'm new here. Any tips?" Or tell me just the simple tell me, you know, you could say, "How does this group work? What's the feel? Who should I be talking to?" Just any kind of icebreaker conversation. But again, ask them about them. They'll very happily draw you into a conversation, as opposed to being the guy that says, "Hi, this is me. Do you want to buy that thing?" Don't do what I did when
I think that's super helpful though, because there's no denying that even with me, before I joined my first networking event, it was on Zoom, my first event ever. It was one of the Ripple Effects meetings. I was so nervous because it was a new environment for me. And I know people are listening right now who even may have been in business for a while, but they're still nervous to do this thing called networking. So that was very helpful in what you can do once you're actually there, how to get into a conversation. But also, like, understand that you don't need to have your, what Christine calls her whiplash statement, or your elevator pitch, or your Spielberg film reel. You don't need to have that down off the bat. Like you were a writer, right? But to other people, they're like, okay, cool. I don't necessarily see how you can help me because there isn't a specific result there, but you started to listen to what people wanted, right? We can apply that to our lives too. Like, you know, as a coach, if you hear that people are looking for coaching on how to eliminate some negative beliefs that they have, or disempowering beliefs, or they want to get their body into a specific shape, or they want to move up into their company, they're looking for maybe a career coach or anything like that, then you can say, okay, noted. And you can actually listen for what people want. And like you did, build your product around what people actually wanted. How long would you say it took before you were able to say, okay, a lot of people want to learn about Twitter. I'm going to put something together when it comes to Twitter and actually help people to overcome some of the challenges that they're facing?
Couple of months. I'd spun up a product
Pretty
and I
quickly.
sold it to the group. I actually ended up doing an in-person workshop to
Okay.
talk about Twitter, which then became a LinkedIn workshop because that was starting to grow at that point. Because again, that's one of the beauties of being a small business owner. You can move quickly based on feedback, whereas I think a lot of small business owners kind of get stuck trying to make a perfect product. And I'm going to pour over the website and the social media. I'm going to put it out there, and that awful feeling that no one's responded.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas test, and it's what Apple call I don't know if it's by Apple, but when I worked briefly at an Apple store, probe and position. So find out the demand before you position the product. But yeah, I don't. Once I kind of got that, it didn't end there. By the way, I started teaching people how to use social media. I then started teaching people how to blog, and I did a bit of outsourced blogging. But of course, what happened when I started doing blogging? I started to talk about the power of blogging for SEO, for brand awareness. A lot of the people that I was speaking to said, "Yeah, but I can't actually add a blog to my website." We're going back a few years now, probably 10 years. Oh, right. Okay. And then suddenly that alerted me to the fact that so many of the people that go networking had no visibility or control over their website. And more worryingly, a lot of people were paying for things that they didn't understand.
Yes.
They were paying for hosting and then updates, and they didn't really understand. You know, I worked with one guy that was quite an awful situation. The web supplier that he was working with would charge him to update WordPress, even though it was set to auto renew.
Wow.
So he literally did nothing for that money. And then if the update to WordPress caused some of the plugins to stop working, he would then charge again to troubleshoot those problems.
Yeah.
And so that was actually Kelly comes into this equation because, again, based on supply and demand, I started building websites for people because that's where the pain point was.
Yes. I love how you've evolved in business based on what other people wanted. Like one of my biggest mistakes was creating a course as my first course ever. And I'm glad that I did it now because I learned these things the hard way. But I created a course on goal setting because I wanted to know more about goals. Goals made a big difference for me. And I assumed that other people would want that same exact thing. But it wasn't the case. I created a product that I thought other people would want, but really I was the one who wanted that. You, on the other hand, went into things and you're like, okay, what do people actually want? And how can I build a product around that? Even if all the content was the same, like even if I took my goal setting course and renamed it and framed it around the problems that they were actually experiencing, that right there would have made a drastic difference in the demand that product would have actually had with other people.
Yeah. And think about particularly B2B suppliers, and a lot of your audience will be this. How many clients do you really have? I mean, we talk about abundance of volume of contacts, and people get quite obsessed with networking. It's about making as many connections as possible. It's not, because most B2B suppliers that I encounter probably had 10 to 15 clients maximum at any one time. And most of those clients, by the way, will come from 2 or 3 serendipitous connections. We're not talking massive volume. So again, you're better off getting to know 50 people very well. They become your trusted network, and build a product for 5 people, because the chances are if it appeals to 5 and they're willing to put down hard cash, you'll be able to sell it to another 5 people. But we get really hung up on volume, don't we?
Yes. Great point. And I think that's a very new thing in this digital world, because back then we wouldn't have been thinking about thousands. We would have been thinking about the local community. We would have been thinking about our neighbor. What do they want? What do 5 people want? So it's very much this giant world that we're open to, which is a beautiful thing, but we can get caught up in that. And I think that's a great point.